Light Yagami did not begin his story as a monster. He began as a brilliant young man trapped in a world he believed was rotten beyond repair. Surrounded by crime, corruption, and injustice, he looked at society and saw a system that repeatedly failed innocent people. Unlike most people who complain and move on, Light possessed both intelligence and ambition. When the Death Note fell into his hands, it offered him something humanity had never possessed before, the power to decide who lived and who died. At first, Light's intentions appeared noble. He wanted to eliminate criminals and create a safer world. Many people even agreed with his vision. Crime rates fell, and fear spread among those who committed evil acts. To an outsider, Light's actions could almost be mistaken for justice. But beneath those noble intentions lay a dangerous belief, that he alone was qualified to decide what justice meant. Power has a unique way of changing people. It rarely transforms them overnight. Instead, it slowly convinces them that rules no longer apply to them. Every successful use of the Death Note reinforced Light's belief that he was special. Every criminal he killed made him feel more justified. The more power he gained, the less willing he became to question himself. What makes Light Yagami fascinating is that he never saw himself as evil. Unlike many villains who enjoy causing suffering, Light genuinely believed he was saving humanity. This self-righteousness made him even more dangerous. Because he viewed himself as a savior, every terrible act could be justified in his mind. Every innocent life lost became merely a necessary sacrifice. By the end of his journey, Light was no longer fighting for justice. He was fighting for control, worship, and his own survival. The story of Light Yagami is not simply about a notebook that kills people. It is about how absolute power can corrupt even the most intelligent and seemingly righteous individual until they become the very thing they once hated. 1. He began believing he was a god. The first step in Light's corruption was his growing belief that he was superior to everyone else. Initially, he saw himself as someone carrying out justice. But as criminals began dying across the world, he realized that entire nations were reacting to his actions. Governments feared him. Criminals feared him. Ordinary citizens debated whether he was humanity's savior. For a teenager already accustomed to being praised for his intelligence, this level of influence was intoxicating. Light was no longer merely a student. He had become a force capable of shaping the world. Instead of remaining humble, he allowed this power to feed his ego. He started viewing ordinary people as inferior beings incapable of understanding his vision. Eventually, Light stopped seeing himself as a human being with flaws. He began referring to himself as the god of a new world. This was the point where his moral downfall accelerated. Once a person believes they are a god, criticism becomes blasphemy, disagreement becomes rebellion, and murder becomes justice. The moment Light elevated himself above humanity, he also placed himself beyond morality. 2. Success made him believe he could never be wrong. One of the most dangerous things that happened to Light was that his plan initially worked. Crime rates dropped. People began praising Kira. News reports reflected the impact of his actions. Every success served as evidence that he was right and everyone else was wrong. Human beings learn through consequences. When our decisions fail, we are forced to reconsider our beliefs. Light rarely experienced failure during the early stages of his journey. Instead, he received constant reinforcement. Every criminal death appeared to strengthen his worldview. Every successful manipulation convinced him that his intelligence made him untouchable. Because of this, Light gradually lost the ability to self-reflect. He stopped questioning whether his methods were ethical. He stopped considering alternative viewpoints. The possibility that he might be wrong became unimaginable to him. His confidence transformed into arrogance, and his arrogance transformed into tyranny. By the time serious challenges emerged, Light was no longer searching for truth, he was only searching for ways to prove himself right. 3. He started seeing people as tools instead of human beings. One of the clearest signs of Light's corruption was the way he began treating the people around him. In the beginning, he claimed his goal was to create a better world for humanity. However, as time passed, he became less concerned with people and more concerned with achieving his objectives. Friends, family members, and allies gradually became pieces on a chessboard. Light manipulated anyone who could help him move closer to victory. He carefully studied people's emotions and weaknesses, then used those vulnerabilities against them. Instead of building genuine relationships, he created situations that would benefit his plans. His intelligence allowed him to predict how others would react, making manipulation easier and more effective. When someone starts viewing people as tools, empathy begins to disappear. Light no longer cared about the emotional pain he caused others as long as it served his mission. This mindset made increasingly cruel decisions possible. The more he treated people as objects, the easier it became to sacrifice them whenever they were no longer useful. 4. The fear of losing power controlled him. Power is addictive because once people become accustomed to it, losing it becomes terrifying. Light experienced this fear constantly. The Death Note gave him control unlike anything any human had ever possessed. It allowed him to influence entire nations from the shadows. At first, Light used the notebook to pursue what he believed was justice. Eventually, however, protecting his power became just as important as achieving justice. Every investigation, every suspicion, and every obstacle threatened the position he had built. Instead of accepting accountability, he became obsessed with preserving his authority. Fear often pushes people toward actions they never imagined they would take. The possibility of losing his status as Kira caused Light to make increasingly ruthless decisions. Rather than asking what was right, he asked what would keep him safe. The notebook was no longer merely a tool, it had become part of his identity, and losing it felt like losing himself. 5. He began killing innocent people. The greatest contradiction in Light's mission was that he claimed to be creating a better world while increasingly harming innocent people. Initially, he targeted criminals. Although many people disagreed with his methods, at least his targets were individuals who had committed crimes. That boundary did not last. As investigators closed in on him, Light started viewing innocent people as obstacles. Anyone capable of exposing him became a threat regardless of whether they had committed any wrongdoing. Protecting Kira became more important than protecting justice. This marked a major turning point in his downfall. Once innocent lives became acceptable sacrifices, Light crossed a line from which there was no return. The young man who wanted to eliminate evil was now causing suffering himself. Ironically, he became the very type of person he once claimed to oppose. 6. His obsession with defeating L consumed him. The arrival of L changed everything. For the first time, Light encountered someone capable of challenging his intellect. L refused to accept Kira's version of justice and dedicated himself to uncovering the truth. What began as a battle of ideas quickly became a battle of egos. Light could not tolerate the existence of someone who questioned his authority. L represented a threat not only to his plans but also to his self-image. Every move L made felt like a personal attack. Over time, defeating L became an obsession. Light was no longer focused solely on creating a better world. He wanted victory. He wanted proof that he was smarter. His desire to defeat his rival grew stronger than his original mission. In many ways, this rivalry exposed how much his priorities had changed. 7. He confused justice with personal judgment. Justice is supposed to operate according to principles and laws rather than personal emotions. Light gradually abandoned this idea. He believed his intelligence made him uniquely qualified to decide who deserved punishment and who deserved mercy. The problem was that no human being possesses perfect knowledge. People make mistakes. They have biases. They act based on incomplete information. By placing himself above legal systems and moral accountability, Light assumed a responsibility no human could safely carry. As his power grew, his judgments became increasingly subjective. What began as punishment for criminals evolved into punishment for anyone who stood in his way. The distinction between justice and personal preference slowly disappeared. Light was no longer enforcing justice, he was enforcing his will. 8. He stopped valuing human life. One of the saddest aspects of Light's transformation was the gradual loss of respect for human life. At the beginning, every name written in the death note carried significance. The act of taking a life still had emotional weight. After years of using the notebook, death became routine. Writing names became as casual as completing a daily task. Human beings were reduced to statistics, obstacles, or targets. The emotional barrier that normally prevents people from harming others weakened with each use of the notebook. When life loses value, cruelty becomes easier. Light's growing indifference allowed him to make decisions that would once have horrified him. The notebook did not merely give him power, it gradually desensitized him to the consequences of that power. 9. He became addicted to control. Control became one of Light's greatest weaknesses. The death note allowed him to influence events with extraordinary precision. He could shape investigations, manipulate individuals, and eliminate threats from a distance. Over time, Light developed an overwhelming need to control everything around him. Uncertainty became intolerable. He wanted every situation to unfold according to his plans. Whenever events moved beyond his control, he reacted with anxiety and desperation. This addiction to control trapped him. Instead of adapting to changing circumstances, he constantly tried to force reality into the shape he desired. The more control he gained, the more he needed. Like many forms of addiction, satisfaction became impossible because the desire only continued growing. 10. He chose his ego over his original mission. The final reason behind Light's downfall was his inability to separate his mission from his ego. In the beginning, he wanted to change the world. By the end, preserving his image became equally important. Light could no longer imagine a world where Kira was defeated. Such a defeat would mean admitting that he was wrong. For someone who had spent years viewing himself as humanity's savior, that possibility was unbearable. His identity became completely intertwined with the role he had created. This is ultimately what destroyed him. The mission that began as an attempt to improve society transformed into a quest for self-glorification. Light's greatest enemy was not Nier, or any investigator. It was his own pride. The more he worshipped his intelligence and power, the further he drifted from the ideals he once claimed to defend. Light Yagami's story remains one of the most fascinating character studies in fiction because it forces viewers to ask uncomfortable questions. What would happen if an ordinary person suddenly gained godlike power? Would they remain moral, or would they slowly convince themselves that they were above morality? Light's journey suggests that the answer is far more complicated than most people want to admit. What makes his downfall tragic is that it did not happen overnight. There was no single moment when he became completely evil. Instead, countless small compromises slowly transformed him. Each decision seemed justified at the time. Each step felt reasonable. Yet together, those steps led him further and further away from the person he once was. Many villains embrace their darkness from the beginning. Light was different. He genuinely believed he was helping humanity. That belief made his corruption more disturbing because it showed how noble intentions can be twisted when combined with unchecked power and absolute certainty. The story of Light Yagami is ultimately a warning about the dangers of arrogance. Intelligence, talent, and ambition are valuable qualities, but they become dangerous when they are not balanced by humility. The moment a person stops questioning themselves, they become vulnerable to believing their own lies. In the end, Light Yagami did not fall because he lacked intelligence. He fell because he allowed power to replace compassion, pride to replace wisdom, and control to replace humanity. His story is a reminder that the greatest threat to justice is often not evil itself, but the belief that one person alone has the right to define it.